He silent Queen's revenge. Stop. If you crave epic stories of ultimate justice, you have to subscribe right now and hit the notification bell. Don't miss a single twist. The woman in the modest navy blue dress. He thought he had all the cards. At the peak of New York Fashion Week, the most photographed event of the year, Victor Sterling was ready to unveil his new life. Dangling from his arm wasn't his quiet, self-effacing wife, but his dazzling mistress, Serafina Silver, a woman he was proudly presenting as his future. He was moments away from a promotion that would cement his legacy. But in a world built on image and power, the most devastating secrets are the ones hidden in plain sight. What happens when the woman you discard turns out to be the sole owner of your entire universe? Prepare yourself for a story of betrayal, public humiliation, and an epic revenge that proves you should never, ever underestimate the silent ones. Part 1. The Beige Wife. The air in the Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and simmering resentment. Victor Sterling adjusted the knot of his silk tie. His reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass showed a man carved by ambition. Tonight was the apex of his career, the culmination of a decade spent elbowing his way up the corporate ladder at Aurelian Vanguard, the global luxury fashion conglomerate. The annual Vanguard Gala, the centerpiece of NY Fashion Week, was his stage. And tonight, he would finally shed the last vestige of his former, insignificant life. That life was standing by the master bedroom doorway, holding a lint roller, Eleanor, his wife of 10 years. "You have something on your shoulder, honey," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic, as if his perfection were a shared responsibility, and she had somehow failed. Victor didn't turn. He just glared at his reflection, a flicker of irritation crossing his handsome face. "I've got it, Eleanor." He brushed an invisible speck from his custom-tailored suit. The suit was a statement. It screamed power, success, and a future she was not part of. Eleanor stepped back slightly, holding the lint roller like a useless talisman. She was dressed in a simple, elegant, but forgettable navy blue dress. It was the kind of dress women wore when they didn't want to be noticed, when their primary function was to be a supportive shadow. For 10 years, she had played that role to perfection. She'd organized his life, hosted his boring but necessary business dinners, remembered his superiors' children's birthdays, and celebrated his every minor victory as if it were a moon landing. She had been the perfect, silent, homebody wife, and he was monumentally sick of it. "Is the car ready?" he asked. "C'est petit." His tone clipped. He checked his phone, the screen lighting up with a message from his starlet, a photo of her in a shimmering, backless silver gown. The caption read, "Ready to be introduced, my love." A slow, predatory smile touched Victor's lips. "It's been waiting downstairs for 10 minutes, Eleanor replied. He could hear the faint tremor in her voice. She wasn't stupid. She'd known something was wrong for months. The late nights he no longer bothered to explain. The scent of a different perfume on his shirts. The cold chasm that had opened between them in their king-sized bed. But she had never once confronted him. That was Eleanor. She was pathologically conflict-averse. She absorbed his neglect and cruelty with a quiet, maddening stoicism. "Good," he said, pocketing his phone. "I'm leaving." He finally turned to face her. He allowed his gaze to sweep her figure, from her sensible low heels to her neat, pinned-up brown hair. There was nothing wrong with her. She was pleasant-looking. She was sweet. But she was wallpaper in a world of vibrant, contrasting statement art. She was beige wallpaper. He was a masterpiece trapped in a beige room. "You look nice," he offered, the compliment as hollow as the vows he made at their wedding. "You look incredible, Victor." she said, and her sincerity was a dull ache in his chest. "I hope you have a wonderful night. I know how important this is. The promotion to Chief Operating Officer for North America is practically mine," he interrupted, waving a dismissive hand. "Mr. Allister is retiring. He practically told me the job was mine last week. Tonight is just the coronation." He craved that title more than anything. It was the key to everything. The power, the respect, the life he truly deserved. A life with a woman like Serafina, a woman who shone as brightly as he did. He walked toward the door, his hand on the knob. He felt a fleeting, minuscule pang of what might have been guilt. But he crushed it. This was necessary. Evolution. A snake shedding its skin. "Don't wait up for me," he said. The words were a final, casual severance. He didn't look back as he left the apartment, the heavy door clicking shut behind him, sealing her inside her gilded cage. He didn't see her shudder. He didn't see her shoulders slump, or how she raised a trembling hand to her lips. He didn't see the single tear that traced her cheek before she deliberately and methodically wiped it away. He only saw the future, and it was gleaming, silver, and waiting for him in the back of a black car downtown. Part 2. The stage is set. As Victor's elevator descended, Eleanor walked to the massive window overlooking the city. New York's lights glittered below, a galaxy of ambition and dreams. His dream was to conquer it. He never paused to ask what her dream was. She picked up her own phone, not the simple one she used for groceries and daily reminders, but a sleek, encrypted device hidden in her study. She scrolled to a single contact, marked only with an initial, T. She typed a short, simple message. "He's on his way. Are we ready?" The reply came back in seconds. "The stage is set, Madam President. We are ready." Eleanor took a deep, steady breath. The first truly full breath she felt she had taken in years. She looked at her reflection, not in the dark window glass, but in the polished screen of the device in her hand. The reflection of the woman in the simple navy blue dress flickered, and for a moment, she saw the queen beneath. Tonight's coronation was not Victor's, it was hers. The grand atrium of the New York Public Library's Astor Hall. It was a cathedral of modern excess. White marble columns soared, holding up a ceiling that revealed the twilight sky. Orchestral music drifted through the air, an elegant facade over the raw, pulsating ambition of the crowd. This was the beating heart of NY Fashion Week, and Victor Sterling felt its rhythm in his blood. He made his entrance not with a bang, but with a calculated seismic shockwave. On his arm was Serafina Silver. She was everything Eleanor was not. Clad in a silver dress that looked poured over her sculpted figure, Serafina was a supernova. Her hair was a platinum cascade. Her smile was a weapon, and her eyes scanned the room with the hungry assessment of a predator who knows she is the most dangerous thing in the jungle. Every camera flash seemed to find them. The frantic clicks created a wall of sound that was music to Victor's ears. He saw the whispers start immediately. He saw Lydia Jones, the city's most feared fashion blogger, her fingers already flying across her phone screen, her expression a mix of shock and delight. He saw his Aurelian Vanguard colleagues, eyes wide, some with disapproval, others with a grudging respect for his sheer audacity. This was more than just bringing a date. It was a statement of intent, a public execution of his marriage. "Honey, everyone is watching," Serafina purred, pressing closer to him. Her touch was electric, a jolt of validation. "Let them watch," Victor murmured, his voice low and confident. He steered her toward the main champagne bar, his hand possessively on her lower back. "Tonight we give them something to talk about for the rest of the year." He felt powerful, untouchable. He had outgrown Eleanor, outgrown the quiet, respectable life she represented. That life was a starter home. He was ready for the palace. Serafina was the queen he had chosen to install. Victor, what a surprise. The voice belonged to Mr. Allister's son, Ethan, a man whose position was based on nepotism rather than talent. Ethan's eyes flicked rapidly from Victor to Serafina and back, with a sly, knowing smile. And who is this? Victor's grin widened. This was the moment, the first brick of his new empire. Ethan, I'd like to introduce you to Serafina Silver. My muse, he said, loading the word with meaning. Charmed, Serafina said, extending a hand, her voice a husky whisper that promised secrets and sin. The pleasure is all mine, Ethan drawled, already captivated. A muse, you say? I didn't know you were seeking new inspiration, Victor. Where has Eleanor been hiding tonight? The question was a jab, and Victor felt it, but parried with effortless arrogance. Eleanor is indisposed, he said, his tone suggesting a delicate private matter rather than a brutal discard. She understands my work requires a certain public dynamism. Serafina embodies the new direction I envision for Aurelian vanguard. It was a bold, almost treasonous statement. He was already speaking as if he were in charge, redefining the company's image in his own likeness. He was claiming the throne in front of the prince. They moved through the crowd, a vortex of glamour and gossip. Victor introduced Serafina to designers, to Vogue and Harper's Bazaar editors, to the money men who kept the gears of the fashion world turning. With every introduction, he solidified her position, and by extension, his own. He used phrases like the brand's future face and a new era of inspiration. He was writing a new narrative for himself in real time, and Serafina was his co-author. She played her part with masterful precision. She was charming, witty, and just aloof enough with the right people, while exuding an aura of untouchable stardom. She spoke of Victor's genius, his unmatched vision, and how he was now liberated to truly achieve his destiny. They were a team, a power couple forged in ambition and presented to the world for its adoration. Victor saw Lydia Jones watching him near a marble pillar, her expression unreadable. He decided to address the narrative head-on. Leading Serafina over, he greeted the blogger with a disarming smile. Lydia, always a pleasure. I see you've noticed the main event of the evening. Lydia's eyes, sharp as tailor's needles, took in the sight of them. Victor, you have certainly made a statement, a rather bold one. The press is on fire. Victor Sterling's new muse and the missing wife. Is that the headline you were hoping for? The right headline writes itself only when the story is compelling enough, Victor replied smoothly. Aurelian vanguard isn't about playing it safe. It's about vision, passion, and daring to embrace the future. That is what Serafina represents. That is what I represent. He was intoxicated by his own boldness. The champagne, the flashing lights, Serafina's heady presence on his arm. It all combined into a potent drug. He felt like a king surveying his court, utterly unaware that the ground beneath his throne was about to crumble into a bottomless abyss. He was so focused on the spectacle of Serafina's arrival that he missed the true arrivals of the night. He didn't see the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, the way the most powerful players, the board members, the old money investors, weren't looking at him or his glittering mistress. Their attention was being drawn elsewhere, toward the stage where preparations were being made for an announcement that had nothing to do with the North American COO. It was an announcement that would redefine power in his world, and Victor Sterling, in his moment of supreme arrogance, was about to become a footnote in a story far grander and more terrifying than he could ever imagine. Interactive question. If you were Eleanor right now, would you choose to unmask Victor privately and save face, or publicly guaranteeing maximum humiliation. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Part 3. The Wrecking Ball. The gala was in full swing. A symphony of clinking glasses, false laughter, and the relentless, unspoken struggle for position. Victor was at the center of his own storm, and he reveled in the chaos. He stood tall near the imposing ice sculpture of the Aurelian Vanguard logo, a triumphant smile permanently fixed on his face. "The brand has stagnated, you understand," he explained to a trio of influential retailers, his voice just loud enough to be overheard. "Mr. Alistair is a legend, but his time has passed. We need blood. We need fire. We need to appeal to a new generation that values authenticity and boldness." He gestured vaguely toward Serafina, who was laughing with a famous film director nearby. "We need a narrative that feels alive." The retailers, men in their late 60s who had watched ambitious young executives come and go, nodded politely, their expressions unreadable. They had heard this pitch before, in various forms, from countless young Turks who thought they had reinvented the wheel. But Victor's confidence was contagious, and the very public drama he had orchestrated gave his words a certain weight. He wasn't just talking about change, he was embodying it. He felt a hand on his arm. It was Gerald Thompson, the company's CFO, a man whose personality was as gray as his suit. "Victor, a word." Victor sighed internally, but maintained his slick facade. "Gerald, enjoying the party?" "It's an expensive party," Gerald said, his eyes humorless. "Listen, Victor, what you're doing here is risky. The board values stability, tradition. Publicly shaming your wife, a woman who has been nothing but classy, while draping yourself over, well, it's not a good look." Victor let out a short, sharp laugh. "Gerald, my friend, you are a numbers man. You don't understand branding. Good looks are manufactured. I am manufacturing a new one. Power is no longer about stability. It's about disruption. And Eleanor represents stability. Quiet, comfortable, utterly boring stability. That is not the future. She is not the future." He said the last words with such definitive disdain that even Gerald, a man known for his stoicism, looked taken aback. "Be that as it may," the CFO said, lowering his voice. "Old Mr. Alistair is quite fond of your wife, speaks of her warmly. He may not appreciate this spectacle." "Mr. Alistair appreciates results," Victor countered, his patience wearing thin. "And he knows I'm the only one with the guts to deliver them. He's about to name me his successor. A little spectacle will be forgiven when I double our stock price in the next 18 months. Gerald shook his head slowly, the gesture grim. "Just be careful what you wish for, Victor. The marble floors in this place are beautiful, but they're slippery." With that cryptic warning, the CFO melted back into the crowd. Victor scoffed, dismissing the man as a relic. He scanned the room for Serafina and saw her in deep conversation with a New York Times reporter. Perfect. She was planting the seeds, framing the narrative just as they'd rehearsed. The story of the brilliant, repressed executive and his new, liberating muse. The story of Victor Sterling. Unchained. He found himself drifting near a conversation between two of the oldest board members, a pair of sisters, the formidable Chen twins, who had inherited their father's seat, and his unprecedented skepticism, keeping it a secret for so long. The discipline, the sheer audacity, one said to the other. "Father always said the de Montigny family was a different breed," the other replied, her voice a conspiratorial murmur. "They play the long game. They never show their hand until they have a royal flush." Victor frowned, catching the name. De Montigny. He knew the name, of course. It was a legendary name in European finance and textiles, synonymous with old-world power and unimaginable wealth. The family was notoriously private, their empire managed through proxies and labyrinthine holding companies. Aurelian Vanguard itself was a subsidiary of one of those larger, anonymous conglomerates. He'd never given it much thought, other than knowing his ultimate benefactor was a shadowy, powerful entity. Yet he assumed the Chen twins were discussing some arcane business deal, some shift in the parent company's portfolio that was unrelated to his impending ascent. His world, in that moment, was happily small, revolving entirely around himself, his ambition, and the woman in the silver dress. He topped up his champagne, the bubbles effervescing against the glass, mirroring the effervescent excitement in his veins. He was so close, the culmination of everything he had worked for, planned for, and sacrificed. He thought of Eleanor again, a fleeting image of her in that bland navy blue dress. He imagined her at home, maybe watching a boring documentary or reading a book, blissfully unaware that her world was being dismantled and auctioned off to the highest bidder. A small, cruel smile appeared on his lips. She had served her purpose. She had been the stable, respectable wife who helped him climb. But you don't take the ladder to the summit. You kick it away so no one else can follow. The lights in the atrium began to dim, and a hush fell over the crowd. On the stage, a podium was illuminated by a single, bright spotlight. Victor's heart began to hammer in his chest. This was it. He found Serafina's hand and pulled her closer. Their bodies aligned as they turned to face the stage. "Showtime," he whispered in her ear, his voice thick with triumph. She squeezed his hand, her painted nails digging slightly into his skin. "Our show, darling. Never forget it." "Oh, I won't." He looked out at the sea of faces, all of them turned toward the stage, all of them witnesses to his victory. The whispers in the marble had been about him. He was certain of it. He was the story. He was the moment. The universe, in its grand design, had conspired to deliver him to this perfect, triumphant peak. He was absolutely, blissfully, and catastrophically wrong. The man who walked into the spotlight was Mistress. He was 80 years old, with a mane of white hair and a presence that commanded silence without him having to utter a word. He represented the old guard of fashion, a world of elegance, tradition, and quiet, unbreakable power. His retirement was the end of an era, and the beginning, Victor was sure, of his own. Mr. Allister tapped the microphone, the soft sound echoing in the cavernous space. "Good evening, friends, colleagues, visionaries," he began, his voice a raspy but warm baritone. "For 40 years, I have had the great honor of standing at the helm of Aurelian Vanguard. We have dressed movie stars and royalty. We have defined decades and weathered the storms of changing tastes. We have built more than a brand. We have built a legacy." The crowd applauded politely. Victor stood a little taller, a confident smile fixed on his face. He felt Serafina press against him, a silent signal of shared victory. "But legacy," Mr. Allister continued, his gaze sweeping the room, "is not a monument to be admired. It is a living thing. It must be nurtured. It must be challenged. And sometimes, it must be completely reimagined by a new, fearless leader." Victor's heart hammered against his ribs. Fearless leader. He was describing him. He could feel his colleagues' eyes on him. They knew. Everyone knew. Everyone. "Many of you expect me to announce my successor as CEO of Aurelian Vanguard tonight," Mr. Allister said, a sly twinkle in his eyes. "And we will get to that. But first, there is a much more significant announcement to be made. One that concerns the very ownership and future direction of our parent company, the Global de Montigny Group." A flicker of confusion crossed Victor's mind. De Montigny? Why was he talking about the holding company? It was a distant, faceless entity. He wanted to hear his name, feel the applause wash over him. This was an unnecessary delay. "As many know, the de Montigny family has always valued its privacy," Mr. Allister explained. For the last 50 years, the empire has been managed by a board of trustees, waiting for the heir to come of age and decide to take their rightful place at the head of the table. That moment has arrived. A murmur rippled through the crowd. This was unexpected. The notoriously private de Montigny heir was taking control. This changed everything. The Chen twins were now staring at the stage, mouths slightly agape. They knew. Victor's mind raced. What did this mean for him? Would a new, unknown owner honor Alistair's choice for CEO? A knot of anxiety began to form in his stomach. This was not going according to his script. "The heir is no distant stranger," Mr. Alistair's voice boomed, pulling Victor from his spiraling thoughts. "This individual has been among us for years, watching, learning, waiting for the right time to claim what is theirs. A person who understands our world, not from a spreadsheet but from the inside. A person of immense strength, patience, and quiet resolve." Victor scanned the faces of the era's most powerful people. Was it one of them? Some European duke he'd never met? A banking scion working under a pseudonym? His confidence began to unravel at the edges, the fine threads of his arrogance coming undone one by one. "This transition of power has been in the works for over a year," Mr. Alistair stated, his voice rising with theatrical gravity. "And tonight, I have the profound and historic honor of stepping down from my position, not just as CEO of Aurelian Vanguard, but as interim chairman of the Global de Montigny Group Board." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The silence in the room was absolute, a perfect vacuum of anticipation and shock. "It is my great privilege," Mr. Alistair said, his voice ringing with a mix of reverence and triumph as he looked out at the crowd, his eyes seeming to find a specific spot in the shadows. "To introduce you to the new majority shareholder, the heiress to the de Montigny fortune, and the new chairwoman of the entire global enterprise." Victor held his breath, his entire future hanging on the next words. Mr. Alistair smiled, a wide, genuine, almost paternal smile. "Please welcome Ms. Eleanor de Montigny Sterling." The name hit Victor with the physical force of a lightning strike. Eleanor de Montigny Sterling. For a frozen second, the words did not register. They were a random assembly of sounds, an audio system glitch, a cruel joke. He swiveled his head slightly, a frown of disbelief, expecting to see some other, older, more formidable Eleanor step out from backstage. But there was no one else. The name echoed in the deep silence of the atrium. Eleanor de Montigny Sterling, his quiet, bookish, beige wallpaper wife. It was impossible. It was absurd. It was. And then he saw her. She emerged not from the wings of the stage, but from a private corridor beside the hall, a path reserved for guests of honor and royalty. The transformation was so absolute, so breathtaking, it defied belief. Gone was the simple navy blue dress, the sensible shoes, the apologetic posture. The woman who stepped into the soft glow of a follow spot was a queen. She wore a bespoke emerald green silk dress that shimmered like a living thing, its cut severe and elegant. Diamonds, real, spectacular diamonds, blazed at her throat and ears. The legendary de Montigny emeralds, rumored to have been lost for a generation. Her hair, once pinned up in a modest bun, was styled in a polished, powerful chignon that highlighted the aristocratic lines of her face. But it was her expression that shattered Victor's world. The gentle, compliant sweetness was gone, replaced by a cold, unwavering composure. Her eyes, which for years had only reflected his own image, now held a deep, ancient power. She walked with a grace and purpose he had never seen, each step silent and deliberate on the marble. The sound in the room rushed back in, a tidal wave of gasps, frantic whispers, and the explosion of hundreds of camera flashes. Lydia Jones looked like she had seen a ghost, her phone nearly slipping from her trembling hands. Gerald Thompson, the CFO, simply nodded to himself, as if he had finally seen the punchline of a very long, very complicated joke. Ethan Allister's jaw was on the floor. Victor couldn't breathe. His lungs had seized. His blood had turned to ice in his veins. He felt Serafina's hand go limp in his, then slide away completely. He looked at her. The color had drained from her face. Her femme fatale smile was replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Her eyes flicked between Victor and the majestic figure approaching the stage, the frantic calculations visible on her face. She had boarded a shooting star's wagon. Victor was radioactive, and she was fleeing the exclusion zone. He stood frozen, a statue of hubris in a Tom Ford suit, as his wife, the woman he had discarded as a footnote in his life, prepared to read his eulogy to the entire world. The thunder of her name was still ringing in his ears, and he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that the storm had only just begun. Part 4. The Execution. Eleanor's voice, when she finally spoke, was not loud, but it filled the cavernous hall with astonishing clarity. It was the same soft voice she had used to ask if he wanted coffee, but it was now imbued with a steely resonance that demanded absolute attention. "Thank you, Mr. Allister," she began, her gaze leaving Victor to address the crowd, "for your stewardship, your friendship, and for keeping my family's legacy safe until I was ready to claim it." She then directed her attention to the assembled guests. "Many of you are surprised to see me here. For 10 years, I have been content to live a quiet life. I believe that to truly understand an empire, one must first understand its people, not from a boardroom, but from the ground up. I have watched this company. I have studied its strengths and identified its weaknesses. And I have learned a great deal about character, about loyalty, and about betrayal. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, and Victor felt each one pierce his skin. He was suffocating, drowning in the shocked, scornful gazes of the very people he had spent his life trying to impress. He saw Serafina slinking through the crowd, her silver dress a flash of light as she bolted toward the exit. A rat leaving a sinking ship. She didn't even spare him a backward glance. Aurelian Vanguard, and indeed the entire global de Montigny group, is entering a new era, Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. An era of integrity, innovation, and strength. We will cull the parts of this organization that have become decadent, dishonest, or disloyal. We will reward talent and vision, but we will no longer tolerate arrogance and duplicity. Our future will be built on a foundation of respect. Effective immediately, the board has approved my proposed restructuring plan." A new wave of murmurs swept the room. She already had a plan. She had the board's approval. This wasn't a recent development. This had been in motion for months, perhaps years. While he was plotting his vulgar little affair and his insignificant ascent, she had been moving armies and redrawing maps. Her speech was brief, powerful, and visionary. She outlined a future for the company that was both exciting and ruthless. She ended by thanking everyone for their attendance and promising a new dawn for the company. The atrium erupted in thunderous applause. It was genuine, fervent applause for the unexpected queen who had just claimed her throne. As the clapping subsided and the lights came up, a swarm of journalists and well-wishers surged toward the stage, all desperate for a word with the new empress of fashion. But Eleanor held up a hand, and 2 large, impeccably dressed men from her security detail materialized, creating a clear path for her as she descended the stairs. She ignored the clamoring reporters, her eyes fixed on one target: Victor. She walked toward him, the crowd parting before her like the Red Sea. The whispers died in her wake. The air crackled with tension. Victor was anchored to the spot, a prisoner awaiting his sentence. She stopped a few feet from him. Up close, her transformation was even more profound. The power she radiated was a palpable force. "Hello, Victor," she said, her voice now a low, private murmur that was more terrifying than any shout. "Eleanor, I don't understand," he stammered, his mind a vortex of confusion and terror. "De Montigny, your family." "My mother was the last direct heiress," she explained calmly, as if discussing the weather. "When she and my father passed, the estate was placed in a trust until I turned 35, or until I felt I was ready to lead. I chose to wait. I wanted to live a normal life. I wanted to see if I could be loved for who I was, not what I owned. I wanted to see what kind of man I had married, when he thought no one of importance was watching." She paused. Her eyes locked on his. "And you showed me." The cold, simple truth of it crashed into him. Their entire life together. His whole career had been a test, a long, elaborate, 10-year character assessment. And he had failed in the most spectacular way imaginable. "The promotion you were so sure of," she continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "The COO for North America position. I dissolved it this afternoon. It's a redundant role, a vanity title." He flinched as if she had struck him. "Your shares in the company, which were granted as part of your executive compensation package, are subject to a morality clause, a clause I personally drafted with our legal team 6 months ago. Publicly flaunting an affair while representing the company is, I believe, a flagrant violation. They will be forfeited. Of course, you may contest it in court." A small ghost of a smile touched her lips. "My lawyers are the best in the world." He couldn't speak. His throat was rough, his tongue a lead weight in his mouth. "As for your employment," she said, delivering the final fatal blow, "your services are no longer required at Aurelian Vanguard or any of its subsidiaries. Your access has been revoked. The contents of your office will be messengered to your new address, whatever that may be." She gave a discreet nod. 2 security men moved to flank Victor. "These gentlemen will escort you off the premises," Eleanor said, her tone definitive. "Your presence is no longer welcome." She turned to walk away, her back straight, her emerald dress flowing behind her. "Eleanor, wait!" The desperate cry was wrenched from Victor's throat. She stopped, but did not turn around. "After everything we've been through, after everything, don't I deserve something?" he pleaded, his voice cracking, his entire world reduced to this one pathetic appeal. She paused for a long moment. Then, she turned her head slightly, looking at him over her shoulder. Her expression was not pity, but a strange, remote sadness. The kind of sorrow you feel for a creature that has proven a profound disappointment. "You already had something, Victor." Her voice carried the weight of 10 lost years. "You had everything, and you threw it away for a cheap imitation." With that, she continued walking, disappearing into the crowd of her new subjects, leaving Victor Sterling alone in the ruins of his life, with only his public humiliation and 2 security guards for company. The reckoning was complete. Conclusion: the renaissance of the navy blue dress. If you loved this story of shocking twists and definitive justice, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. Share it with a friend who loves a good revenge story. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and tap that notification bell. We have many more tales of drama and intrigue coming your way, and you don't want to miss a single one. Thanks for watching. And that is how a quiet, overlooked wife flipped the script on her arrogant husband in the most public way imaginable. It is a story that reminds us that true power is not always loud and flashy. Sometimes it is silent, patient, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Eleanor de Montigny. Sterling didn't just reclaim her life. She reclaimed the empire that was rightfully hers, proving that the greatest strength often comes from being consistently underestimated. She used the pain as fuel, the betrayal as a foundation, and the humiliation as a lesson for the man who thought he could discard her. Her revenge was not about spite. It was about reappropriation. Reappropriating her story, her value, and her destiny. Her happy ending wasn't finding new love. It was finding her own limitless capacity for leadership. The deep question. Eleanor's story teaches us that Victor's biggest mistake wasn't the infidelity, but underestimating the person closest to him. What do you believe is the single biggest mistake powerful people make in their personal relationships? Leave your opinion in the comment box below. The weeks that followed the Vanguard Gala were a brutal education for Victor Sterling. The story was everywhere, an irresistible cocktail of wealth, betrayal, and revenge. He became a pariah overnight. His name was a joke in boardrooms and a cautionary tale at cocktail parties. Stripped of everything, he was forced to move into a soulless corporate apartment, a stark contrast to the penthouse he once called home. He tried to call Serafina Silver once, but her number was disconnected. A week later, he saw a paparazzi photo of her arm in arm with a grizzled 70-something film director. She was a survivor, and he had merely been a stepping stone on her path. Meanwhile, Eleanor de Montigny Sterling was simultaneously on the cover of Forbes, Fortune, and Vogue. The world was fascinated by her story, but even more by her actions. She was no figurehead. She was a force. She moved with a speed and precision that left the industry breathless, systematically eliminating the executives who had thrived on sycophancy and backstabbing, promoting the quiet, brilliant designers and strategists Victor had overlooked. One cool autumn night, months after the gala, Eleanor stood in her new office on the top floor of the Aurelian Vanguard building. It was a vast modern space with a sweeping wall of glass overlooking the glittering expanse of Manhattan. She held a glass of wine, not champagne, and looked out at the city lights. There were moments late at night when a shadow of the past touched her. A ghost ache for the man she thought she had married, the dream of a simple life she had once cherished. But the feeling was fleeting, a cloud passing in front of the sun. The betrayal had been a brutal, painful fire, but it had burned away the illusions, leaving behind something harder, stronger, and far more real. Her chief of staff, Mr. Thayer, the T from her phone, entered the office quietly, holding a tablet. "Madam President, the quarterly projections are in. We are up 17% across all sectors." Eleanor smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Thayer. A good start." "Indeed," he replied. "And one final piece of news. The law firm representing Mr. Sterling has been in contact with our legal team today. He is withdrawing his contest of the share forfeiture. They say he can no longer afford the legal fees." Eleanor simply nodded, taking a slow sip of her wine. There was no triumph in her, no gloating. It was just a loose end tied, a final chapter closing. Victor Sterling was no longer a villain or a ghost in her life. He was merely irrelevant, a faded photograph of a past she had long transcended. She had shed the name Sterling, along with the woman who had carried it. She looked at the endless city, the dawn of her own empire, and felt not the weight of her legacy, but the lightness of her own limitless future. She was free, the open ending, but as the lights of the city reflected in the vast glass wall, a question lingered, silent and sharp, over Eleanor's tranquil composure. The de Montigny Empire was secure, Victor Sterling was ruined. The betrayal was avenged. Yet, a woman who meticulously plans a decade-long performance, who orchestrates a global takeover in silence, and who maintains ice-cold resolve through a husband's infidelity. What does a woman like that truly want next? Was the quiet beige wife truly gone? Or was the quiet, ruthless power we witnessed simply the first layer of a far more intricate, dangerous game? The true mystery of Eleanor de Montigny. Sterling was not what she had, but what she was capable of. She took one final sip of wine, her emerald eyes reflecting the million lights of the city she now owned. A solitary, unreadable figure at the summit. Final interactive question. The chessboard is cleared. Eleanor has won everything. But what do you think is the ultimate hidden goal of a woman who chose to live a normal life for 10 years only to reveal herself as an empress? What is her true endgame? Leave your theories in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if you were completely shocked by Eleanor's reveal. We'll see you in the next one.